Where is biology now in the process? Remember, biology was trying to catch up with physics, trying to become a mature science. Biology, remember, we last saw with a force of evolution, the force of natural selection, upon which there was nothing to act. By the middle of the 20th century, biology has found the object of that force in the gene. But by this time, philosophically, biologists are still locked into the 19th century way of thinking. Biologists are, in fact, reductionist. As I'll argue later with you, biologists are locked into the concept that the gene and what the gene is the be-all and end-all of every living system. That, in fact, the gene, when you reduce everything to that level, is what determines what a biological system is. Sort of the ultimate reductionist, deterministic kind of argument. This is the antithesis of the uncertainty, complexity framework of quantum mechanics. But yet biology is locked into that by virtue of two things. By virtue of its experimental methodology, which is to reduce, and by virtue of its need to try to prove itself, I think, in the light of what physics had become. But it's proving itself, I think, again, this is my opinion, against a 19th century model, not against a 20th century model. As a result, I'll try to show you that projects like the Human Genome Project, which we'll come to a little bit later in our series, are based on this very reductionist, very deterministic kind of approach to biology, where what is at the basis of everything is really this very small thing, this unit, and not the entire system. Now, stop for a minute and let's go back to our view of nature around us. We see around us the cacti, the shrubbery of the Sonoran Desert. If we look around, we see this incredible diversity, this incredible complexity around us in living systems. We see within them a lot of structure, a lot of organization. And if we try then to break each one of these down into its simplest parts and say every one of these things around us is merely a collection of those parts of it at its simplest level, the genes, and that nothing else exists other than that, we have a logical problem to deal with. And I'll try to give you what are the logical errors, I think, that are made if we lock ourselves into that reductionist approach. In addition, if we ignore the complexity of nature, how this plant interacts with this plant, how I interact with these plants, how the entire environment around us begins to interact, if we ignore those system interactions, we again lose something of the flavor of this. And again, modern biology, rightfully so experimentally, has taken a plant or an animal into the laboratory environment and began to extract information out of it in this very methodological reductionist fashion. But yet to take that back out, using again the philosophical basis I've been describing, and try to say that's how the real world works, leads us again into some logical inconsistencies. So we have a problem now. Biology is up against explaining this world, but is given as its tools a series of disciplines which, by being modeled on physics, by being locked into a theoretical basis and a philosophical basis, which by definition is reductionist and deterministic, doesn't allow the complexity to be analyzed as easily. Now, the problem comes when we face the real world situation. Physics, interestingly enough, has avoided that problem. Physics doesn't actually try to describe the real world. Someone has said that, in asking Niels Bohr, is physics an accurate description of the real world? Niels Bohr's answer to that question was, no, physics is just the way we have of describing the real world in mathematical terms. It isn't actually a description of the real world. It's just a best way we have of using mathematics to describe certain things about the real world. But biology is left with the real world, with living things as they exist. And as a result, is now locked into a model which doesn't include that as a way of thinking about it. Okay. So now we have biology at a crossroads. My intention in this series is then to take you through some information about modern biology, specifically about genetics, about molecular biology and about what has come from molecular biology, biotechnology, and the Human Genome Project. At each step of the way, I'd like to try to explore with you some issues that this raises. In fact, I'd like to discuss those issues in some detail with you in the last of the two of these series of lectures. And our goal will be to try to see how modern biology has gotten itself into a situation in which these issues are raised and what way we have of getting out of it in the hopes of avoiding the issue or overcoming the issue and moving biology on to the next level of information that we'd like to find. In the process of doing this, my goal is to try not to teach you everything about biology, but just to give you enough of the information about modern biology so that in your thinking about it, we can actually go forward and see where this should go. Now, in our next lecture, I plan to explore with you the laws of Mendel. I particularly want to explore with you things about the cell being the basic unit of life, and about how the laws of Mendel were developed by Gregor Mendel, in what climate he developed them, and how it was that they were not accepted originally at the end of the 19th century and only came to be accepted at the beginning of the 20th century. At that point, we'll look at specifically Mendelian genetics, define some terms for you, define some of the structures involved, and go from there to an exploration of how genetics in the modern world raises issues for us in terms of bioethics, in terms of faith issues, in terms of real-world issues for people. And so with that, I think we'll wait for the next lecture to pick up the ideas of Gregor Mendel and modern genetics.